welcome back to Physioplata. I'm your host, Rod Henderson. This is Patrick Damra. We are two physiotherapists, physical therapists who do jiu-jitsu and want to keep you staying on the mats as long as possible. So today we're going to talk about ACL injuries and the infamous video that has gone somewhat viral in the jiu-jitsu community from B-Team. So we're going to break that down. We're also going to break down ACL injuries in particular and talk about some of the rehabilitation for ACL because it comes up, as you can see from the video, and also you may have encountered it in the training room. So Patrick and I are going to break some of that down, talk about how to maybe avoid your risk of ACL injuries or other kind of injuries related to joint locks, and what you can do to, again, stay on the mats. Patrick, what's up?
Yep, I think that's a big topic that we're going to kind of try to tackle a little bit from the perspective of a physio training, jiu-jitsu, and what we learn in school, basically what we have, or the understanding we have from biomechanics, right? And what structures are placed at risk in certain angles or positions. So let's talk about that position on that video that we watched not too long ago, just recently, on where this one jiu-jitsu athlete had a ACL rupture. They call it a grade 3 tear, which is the same thing.
Basically a rupture.
Yep. So let's talk about that position. I'm going to let you talk about that position because that's your world, the 10th planet leg lock game.
Well, this is just just a pretty straightforward leg lock. I mean, in this case, it was so if you get a chance, maybe we may break down the video live one time. That'd be a fun thing to do.
Right.
But we'll just kind of give an overview. It's if you ever watch the B-Team channel, man, those guys, I love. It's a really good jiu-jitsu channel. I like Craig Jones. I like most of those guys.
Very entertaining.
Yeah, very entertaining. It's good jiu-jitsu, so it's fun to watch. This one, it started off of a little shit talking by this young. He looked like a pretty inexperienced grappler. I'm thinking maybe
that was the worst setup I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was
that
pretty.
Poor guy.
It's pretty cringy. This kid just kind of talking shit about how he beat a woman, beat any woman, and then they hook him up with this really high level female grappler, Nora Schultz.
Yeah, you showed me she was German. I gotta say right now, man, she was so mean. Germans are not that mean. I mean, they don't have the greatest reputation, but they're not that awful.
She did very little to offset any German stereotype someone might have. So anyway, they hooked up this kid with Nora, who's a very experienced grappler, clearly versed in leg locks, and she immediately pulled guard, put him into Ashi, and got a nice little reap there, and hit the Z-lock, which is a pretty powerful leg attack. It's gotten a little bit more popular over the last few years, and I think this kid, if I remember right, his name's Liam. Liam just didn't seem to have much awareness of the position.
Do you think it was awareness, or do you think it was just he's in that environment, in that situation, that position so long that he thinks he might have like some freedom of motion or freedom of movement, or do you feel like he was confident enough he could get out? Or is it that, or did he just not know?
I don't know.
Obviously,
it's hard to say.
We'll have to speculate.
Yeah, we have to speculate on it because, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, and then plus the fact that, he's in the center of this gym. It's being videoed. It was kind of a little bit of a build up to it, so you don't know if he kind of felt a little hesitant to tap, because it was less than 1 minute.
Yeah, it was fast.
It was really, really quick. I mean, he didn't just... he was getting pieced up by her pretty good.
He was behind the eight ball.
Yeah. She was clearly a better grappler, and just for whatever reason, she reached back and just hit that Z-lock. And I mean, it was just a very audible pop. And in the video, they've got Lachlan, who's obviously an amazing black belt physical therapist himself, broke down the ACL injury. And
which I thought that was interesting because I thought, man, for some reason he probably would have had at least an MCL grade 1 or 2 strain as well, in addition to the ACL. But I guess it was just the ACLs, according to what they were saying.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, and you and I were talking about this before the show today. That most of the time it's never just an ACL
Yeah,
injury.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
probably, I'm sure there's the MCL caught some of that, and then the meniscus as well. So it's hard to say, but obviously the ACL injury and rupture and the subsequent surgery and recovery, that's going to be what puts him off the mat
For a long time.
for a long period of time. The MCL and the meniscus, can be worked around sometimes, but a really good ACL tear, it's sometimes tough. There's a group of people that can keep functioning fine without an ACL.
I know, I'm just not on board. I feel like if you're that level of an athlete, ACLs are unfortunately one of those ligaments where I've just seen over time that they are best to be repaired surgically to have the highest level of return to activity.
Yeah, and I think some of the literature bears that out as well. But then at the same time, there's some context there too, because he's obviously a young kid.
Yeah.
I would say maybe in his early 20s, and if I'm a young kid starting jiu-jitsu and I tear my ACL, I'm probably more inclined to get the repair. Now, at my age, 52, I tear my ACL. I'm a little more inclined to take a more conservative approach before going in. It's a little bit of a preference there, but the literature on what constitutes a coper, someone who can get along without having an ACL, and a non-coper, people who can't get along, it's still emerging. But this kid is most likely gonna have a repair. As a matter of fact, I think he's already had the reconstruction, and is well into his recovery. So I hope he has a good recovery.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Don't wish that on anyone.
No, you don't wish that on anyone. But I think we probably could talk a little bit about gym and gym culture and how as coaches, again, I'm just a purple belt. You're a blue belt, so we can't speak to how a black belt should run their gym.
Exactly. Right. No, it's not.
However, it is probably a good opportunity to discuss things that can facilitate the risk of injury and things that can maybe mitigate or reduce the risk of injury in your students.
Yeah, maybe just
ultimately, people, we want to keep people in the gym.
Right.
And one of the things that keeps people out of the gym is injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just some, tips and educational pieces to keep people healthy and into training. And, there's always going to be a risk of injury, so it's not like we can take that away. But with the right tools and with good guidance, you're able to help people significantly by having them return faster, but more importantly also to reduce the injury from exacerbating again or causing another injury, right? So the highest risk of a re-injury is determined by whether or not you had a previous injury.
The first injury.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, that's just so important to address and then keep managing over time, right? It's not just like one of those things that I think this comes also back to the physical therapy realm and world where you were working in a clinic with someone who's coming in for who knows, like a knee injury, right? And then you just dig in their history and ask them a lot of questions, and it turns out they had a previous like ankle injury like years ago or something like that, and they had not managed it since after a short spot of rehab or whatever.
Yeah.
And so just managing that and making sure that you have the right tools. That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think as coaches have a hard time here because they're not clinicians. Obviously, they do know certain activities and positions that are more likely to produce injuries. So I think we could probably agree, and most people watching this would agree, that the coaching staff may have slipped a little bit in allowing this match to proceed. I don't know. I mean, I don't know these guys, but and I don't think that they intended for this to happen.
I don't think anyone intended for that to happen.
I got mixed feelings about it.
For sure, yeah. And it's like there's so many unknowns, right? From how things got to that matchup and obviously all that background information that we don't have access to. And I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter really, right? It's just kind of like, what can we do from here on out to help to provide some education, maybe some tips, some measures to reduce risk of injury. So let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Well, I think one of the most important things to mitigate your risk of any injury is to keep yourself as healthy as possible. And I mean, this is all the basic stuff that I tell any athlete to do, regardless of what sport they're participating in. If it's basketball, if they're running, I'm always trying to tell people to do things like get a good night's sleep, stay hydrated, keep good conditioning levels, keep good strength levels, and that's a basic package of strength and conditioning that I think should be a part of, like I said, I think last episode, I've let my conditioning slip a little bit because jiu-jitsu is so fun. I like to do jiu-jitsu, right?
It's hard to.
So trying to balance that out, keeping my conditioning tight, keeping my mobility good, keeping making sure I get enough sleep. But in your 20s, guys in their 20s aren't notorious for getting great sleep. We like to get out there and party and have fun and whatnot. But if you're going to do jiu-jitsu, you're going to do it competitively, or even if you're not super competitive, you're a hobbyist like I am, you still have to keep your body as healthy as possible. And the second thing I would definitely say is, you need to have some situational awareness when you're rolling.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about situational awareness. And I think that's kind of like a little bump that we might have to diffuse here. So in jiu-jitsu, joint locks are very, very prominent, right? That's the main thing. Yep. I mean, you have chokes, but joint locks are a big thing, especially right now on a competition level. It's like I think the highest percentage submissions were like arm locks, straight arm locks or something like that.
Yeah, it depends on the competition. You'll rear naked and arm locks, but
basically all joint locks, right?
Yeah, so sure thing.
With that being said, you train joint locks all the time when you're going to train jiu-jitsu. But so there's a few things that should probably be in the front of your mind, whereas you're training these positions, as you're subjecting your joints to stress, and then hopefully tapping. And one thing that I want to touch on is time under tension. So basically, how often are you subjecting a part of your body or a specific joint to that stress, and then how much time do you have before you do it again? So when it comes to shoulder locks, for example, I'm just going to pick one joint lock that's not used very much because it doesn't have a high success rate, I'm being told, at higher levels, and that's the arm lock, the shoulder lock, the Americana. Yeah, so, but it's not without stress, it's not without damage, because I have experiences working with athletes who have previous shoulder injuries from, obviously they're minor, from holding or not tapping to tight Americanas and shoulder locks. And the way it angles your shoulder, pushing your glenohumeral joint anteriorly so far, people who are also very flexible, that's a very, high risk environment. That's a very high risk situation for that shoulder, and it doesn't provide a good habit, basically. And then I think that's also true for other things that are related to ankle, so to like toe holds or heel hooks, like that in terms of the knee, right? Your ankle only has so much mobility, and if you're like subjecting your ankle to toe holds over time, obviously you'll have some injuries which are minor, right? So you have maybe some ligamentous tears, and you're able to still walk, no problem. You keep on training, right? You just lay off of it for a little while, but that's still now something that has not been addressed. You have more flexibility in your ankle now. So now, even when you get into another toe hold, the next thing in line, for example, is going to be your fibula, right? So like many times I've talked to athletes or jiu-jitsu athletes who are really into leg locks, and they've been competing for many years, and they have just like really floppy ankles, and they're like super mobile, right? And it's because like they've been in a toe hold for so long, so many times, or a different ankle lock or whatever, and it works for them. So now they can get out of it, but still, if they're getting into just the right angle and they have the flexibility in the ankle, then the next thing in line is going to be the fibula. And I've talked to so many people already, they had fractures in the fibulas because they had more mobility in their ankle, but didn't tap because they thought they could get out and didn't feel the stress quite as much because of that mobility now. And then the next thing that was injured was the fibula higher up. And then you can take that to heel hook too. So now you have, your pressure from your heel hook that goes straight to your knee. And I feel like that time under tension, like I was mentioning, it desensitizes that threat to you. And I feel like that's a very tricky thing to allow. Like, obviously you're getting accustomed to that position or that joint lock, just like with the Americana, you're getting used to it. Okay, I have this much time to escape. I have a few more seconds. If he turns his body this way, I'm toast, so I can't let him go that way. But I still don't think that you should totally forget about the stress that you're letting your joints get into, even though it might not be quite the exact position for them to submit you, right? It's just, sure, they're not submitting you, but they're still applying the stress to your joint. And I feel like when you have that happen time over time over time, you're just bound to have something, give at some point. And that's where I think it might be worthwhile to, understand, how much stress has one part of your body, felt for a week. And then, for the next week or so, go a little bit easier on that. Perhaps, do some exercises, some strength training for your knee to tighten it again, right? Because over time, those ligaments might be stretched out. There might be some creep or whatever to where you have some more flexibility. And now you don't want to have too much of that, right? You want to always be kind of as best as you can in that middle of the spectrum where you're not too flexible, not too stiff. You want to be right there where you can take away the stresses as best as you can and be mindful of when or how often you're placing a certain part of your body into a stressful position, week after week. And I feel like with the B team, perhaps, obviously we're making some assumptions there, but that's personally how I feel. His other leg, it seemed was attacked, right? So his attention was taking off for just a split second, maybe, onto the leg that was being attacked. But the other one was kind of extended and kind of like you said, in that Z-lock position, it seemed like. And obviously I'm not the one to talk about technique and all that stuff, but to me it seemed like for just a split second, his attention was taken off of the leg that was in a compromised position because his other leg was being attacked.
Yeah.
And then, it didn't take much to, unfortunately have a serious injury on the leg that was compromised in that certain angle, but was attacked on a secondary basis. Yeah. So I feel like sometimes people desensitize that position that they're in, forget where their joints are in space, so to say, what stresses they might have. So I think awareness is super critical during those times.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I think there's to me, there's two sides of this situational awareness spectrum. One is and you'll see this with really early on, where you don't know you're in trouble, right? Yeah. You don't know that this Kimura is about to be very painful for your shoulder, but all of a sudden it becomes painful. And then sometimes you tap a little bit too late because you're a white belt and you don't know shit, and that's just kind of a thing that happens. Then I think over time you get a little bit more experience, and then that you're kind of tough when it comes to straight ankle locks. Yeah. And so somebody puts you in a straight ankle lock and they're cranking on it and you're like, it's a straight ankle lock, I'm not going to tap to this, right? That kind of thing. So you get kind of almost like a overconfidence about your tolerance for. So it's like that to me. That caught me one time, by the way. Man, I had a buddy. What's up, JP? He was a white belt, but he really, really just. He just developed a real aptitude for leg locks early on in his white belt career. He was murdering people with his leg lock game. Really, really good. Straight ankles, toe holds, heel hooks, everything. And one day he got a hold of a straight ankle, and I'd been escaping his straight ankle locks, for weeks, months, and I was just kind of, he got my ankle, and then I was like, okay, I'm fine here. And he kind of looks at me, bro, are you sure? And so he just kind of went belly down and man, he popped my ankle. It was a good straight ankle lock. I took a nice little pop. It was one of those straight ankle locks that felt almost like a little bit of a toe hold. Nice little lateral ankle
nice
injury.
Little combo.
Yeah. And so right then I learned. I was like, okay, man, I've got to be able to respect. I can't. Yeah. I've got to be aware enough to know when I'm screwed. And so there's that early part where you don't know, and then so you tap too late. And then there's a part where you know.
Yes, exactly.
But you still don't tap, and it's kind of like, well, It's a tricky thing.
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing. Very, very much so. And, it just, again, it's about awareness, alertness, right? Let's, even though we don't feel it quite coming on, whatever joint lock it is, even though, we know that we've been escaping from it previously.
Yep.
Let's not be la-di-da, loosey-goosey with it. Let's be aware that, hey, at any point, if he does something unexpected, I'm in a very, very risky situation here. And I think you can, with the just being more alert about it, or respecting just the position, because maybe, if you don't respect your opponent, I mean, it's not a matter of respect. Let's say if you're not worried about your opponent's skill level, that's one thing.
Right.
But be respectful of the mileage that your joints have, right? Be respectful of how much stress your body has accumulated, right? So if you've escaped from it 10 times, the 12th time or whatever, it might not be the same way, right? And it's just because you've kind of allowed your body to take that stress until something gave. But I think that's a great example, because it's so hard to find just the right perspective when it comes to tapping. So if you don't know, like we talked about, tap early, right?
Yep.
That's one way. And, it might be taken away from a competitive role here or there, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You'll be there again. The next time, what you can do is like have somebody educate you on that position. That's a really important aspect. And I've always like had really great rolling partners and coaches who, if I didn't know about something, I tapped. And if I, didn't realize what position I was I was asking them, hey, can you show me what that was? And I think that's, if you're getting into it, that's a very important thing. And that's just not for jiu-jitsu, man. If you're getting into weightlifting, especially also, if you're getting into running or swimming and you want to, give that sport a good try and stick to it for a little while longer than just a few months, just get educated on the movement patterns, on positions, etc., right? And then especially, of course, in jiu-jitsu, just ask, just learn, positions and defenses and stuff like that. I think especially in the beginning, as far as I was told, like it's more important. I think even Gordon Ryan said it at blue belt also and stuff like that, white belt, it's spot survival, right? So it's more important to learn about how to escape and defend than to attack. But with that mindset, then being aware of when tapping is a good idea is also another learning curve. But hopefully with you guys watching and listening, you'll be able to do that early if you're in doubt, but also don't rely, like you said, on previous experiences and knowledge if you're finding yourself in a compromised position. Just, I think in general, I would say don't let yourself be compromised. And I feel like that video that we watched, I think obviously he was like, trying to keep up, and it was a kind of like high stakes match, so to say, right? Staged a little bit like you said. I think it's just like, you have to be mindful, even when things are going really fast, to get back to basics and stay away from positions that are compromising any part of your body as best as you can, right? So I feel like that's something that I always try to do. Like if I don't know something, especially if I do know something, for example, that you train leg locks a lot, I don't want you near my legs at all. I mean, if I'm even feeling you going for my legs, all my attention is there, right? I'm not gonna try to worry about anything else and try to pass or try to get into a different position. I just want your hands off of my legs, right? Yeah. So I think that's, again, like that situational awareness that you have to bring every time you train.
Yeah. Yeah. And having good training partners makes a big, I think you kind of alluded to that earlier. Who you train with makes a big difference. So if I'm training with you and we've been training for a while together and I know, we've been in the same situation and I'm getting my arm extended in an arm lock, I know if I trust you that you may get that arm lock nice and help, but you're not going to really, really power through it and really crank down on it. And that may give me just a window to kind of play with an escape a little bit, either a hitchhiker or maybe like a Shanji escape or something, but then I'm going to tap.
Yeah.
But then there's other partners, if they get me in the same situation, they're not going to be as forgiving. They're going to power down on that. So if I play with that escape at that moment, my risk likelihood goes up. So
Yeah.
who you train with is another major factor.
And I think if you don't know, then assume the latter, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Assume
Yeah.
that there's gonna be no pause, no time.
Yeah. I just that's what I always say. The people that I train with, if I'm training with somebody that's new, my tap threshold is much lower. I'll just tap. If I'm training with you or training with somebody I trust, we know what we're doing. We know, at least we generally know what we're doing, and so we can play more. And I think that's, for me with jiu-jitsu. I like to compete, but I like to play. To me, this is a
Right.
game, and
Yeah.
so I want to win the game. But I also try to play, and I'm trying to do this for a long period of time. So I have no problem tapping. Or if I get you in a heel hook, the thing at our gym a lot of times is we're doing lots of leg locks and stuff. So if we get a heel hook and it's nice and sunk in, there's just this little, and most gyms are like this. They'll look at you and they're just like, hey,
Yeah.
you're boned here. And,
Yeah,
and
right.
we know, we just tap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just but some places they're gonna go,
Got it.
man. And if I don't know you and I don't know what you're gonna do, bro, I'm tapping. I'll tap.
So let's talk about this. I got a question for you. I wonder what you think. What joint locks do you feel are higher risk? Do you feel upper body, upper extremity, arm attacks are higher risk, or lower body, leg, ankle and stuff?
It's a really good question. I've heard, I remember listening to, I had my thoughts about it, and then I heard Lachlan talking about it at one point.
Okay.
I think. Let's just take shoulder locks, for example. We know how much mobility the glenohumeral joint, the shoulder joints, just got lots and lots of motion. So you have a broad window of, you start to feel some discomfort, some tightness and discomfort, and then it's like all the alarm bells are going off and you got to tap.
Yeah.
So that tends to happen over a period of time, where during that time you can kind of go tap. And so the challenge with leg locks are, particularly rotational leg locks, like heel hooks and things like that. That window is very small. So the moment you start feeling tightness and pain and you go tap, that window is much smaller. So your situational awareness has to be a lot more well tuned with leg locks so I wouldn't necessarily mean that's more risky. Because there's definitely ways to defend a leg lock, just like you can defend a shoulder lock, but you've got to be a little bit careful with it. I've been doing leg locks, and I've been getting leg locked since day one in no-gi.
Yeah, I think it's a little loaded question, so I was just curious what you were saying.
So you're a gi guy. You're a gi guy. You're going to say leg locks more risky.
Well, I wouldn't say it from that perspective because I'm a gi guy. I would say it from the perspective of what you said. Come on, man. These tap people. No, I would say, look, just from the simple fact of throwing up gang signs, man. I don't know if we can do that. I don't think we got YouTube clearance.
Are we going to get demonetized if I keep doing
we're going to. Hey, dude.
Yeah, throw up the 10.
Easy.
Just throw up the 10.
So I was going to say, from the perspective of, let's look at the the neurological system, right? The nerve innervation. So the sensory distribution, I believe, there's more sensory input from the upper extremity to the nervous system than there is to the leg. So I feel like there's more awareness of where your arm is in a certain position or angle, the tension, the pull, etc., pressure, than there is on the leg. And for people like myself who are a little bit more also stiff in the legs, like ankle and hip, I have less range of motion, I have less time before I feel the pressure and attack, so to say, the submission, right? And in my arms, I have more range of motion, naturally also, right? But then that gives me more time before I have a significant amount of pressure, stress on that joint. So that's why I think, in general, I would place the leg attacks at a little bit more of a riskier scale than the arm attacks. But then it also depends on the submission itself, right? So take something like an arm lock in comparison to a Kimura, right? So the Kimura is extremely risky in a sense, right? If not, just from the potential of the injury, right? Yeah. So the Kimura to me is also one of those things I like to use the most, but I do obviously realize in that angle, the shoulder is a substantial compromise angle and position.
You like that Kimura. I can vouch.
Just, hey, you got your heel hooks, I got my shoulder attacks. So yeah, and then in comparison, if you're taking something like, give me a leg lock that you like.
Toe hold.
Okay, so the toe hold. If you take that by itself, also like really compromising for your ankle. So I mean, I would probably say that leg attacks are a little bit riskier. But again, it depends on, number one, the individual. It depends on the submission itself. So it's really like something. It's a moving target. You can't really, pinpoint it to one specific thing. It just depends. There's multiple variables that you have to consider.
Yeah, and I think I think probably that's one of the reasons why leg locks are such a powerful part of jiu-jitsu, is because there's such a narrow window. There's a couple of reasons. One is that if I got this Kimura, it's going to take a little while for it to develop, and the stress to develop, and you're going to eventually tap.
Yeah.
I get hold of your heel. The match is much closer to being over once I catch your heel than once I catch a Kimura grip.
Right.
So, and not just because it's physically you're closer to breaking with the heel hook grip than it is with the Kimura, but it's also, you yourself even said earlier, I'm not as familiar with leg locks. So.
Yep.
From a strategic standpoint, I like rolling with guys who don't train leg locks. I really like competing against guys who don't train leg locks, because it's like they're less likely to know exactly how. The guys at our school, they know how to defend leg locks. They're really, really good. And not only do they know how to defend them, they can counter them very quickly. And then you either get your back taken or you're going to get your leg locked. So I think because leg locks are a little bit more risky, I think probably we should just go ahead and agree that lower extremity locks are more risky than upper extremity. But that's not a bad thing. It's just it makes you have to be a lot more situationally aware when you're working with leg locks.
And then to that point, and at least from my perspective, from my experience, what I've been training so long and so often, they're not leg lock attacks. They're going to be upper body attacks with chokes. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've been like storing in the memory bank and just, saturating the learning experience or the jiu-jitsu training with is just arm attacks all the time. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, I'm good at defending those also because I spend time in them, but I've never spent as much time for the lower body attacks in that sense. So if you're thinking about it, you should probably start as soon as you can, also incorporating those, especially if you're doing both gi and no gi, right? There's no doubt about it. Like, there's Absolutely. No doubt you should be spending just as much time on the lower body attacks as you do upper body.
Because it's risky.
Why would you ignore 50% of the body? Hashtag Dean Lister.
Yeah, Dean Lister, man. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't understand. Again, I don't like to question, hey, you're black belts and you've got lots of experience, but from an injury perspective, I don't understand why you wouldn't train leg locks as early as possible. And other than the lack of situational awareness, which I get, white belts have very little situational awareness, but I think if you have a good coach who can say, hey, look, we're going to work leg locks here, you got to be careful, this is how you apply it, this is what you do, this is how you defend, just like we do with Kimuras, just like we do with straight arm locks and the whole thing. I think it's important. So it's a high risk, but from a jiu-jitsu competitive standpoint, it's worth it. Me trying to hit a leg lock on you, if I don't get it, a lot of times I'm going to get back exposure. So there's a tactical element there. So I think leg locks are really, really important.
I think the hard part, maybe potentially, if I had to put myself into that position, is the overwhelming wealth of knowledge when it comes to techniques and jiu-jitsu in general. That could be, way too overwhelming for someone who's beginning. So what I would maybe say as a recommendation is, if you're concerned about that, I think somebody who is starting out jiu-jitsu should train gi, whatever preference they like. If they're a gi person or a no gi person, I think they should train that for probably the majority of the time, of course. But not exclusively. Like if they're training, like let's take me for example. If I'm enjoying the gi training so much, I shouldn't allow myself to just train in the gi for months on end. I should, if I had to split it up, probably do 2 gi days and 1 no gi day. Just because I can switch the emphasis, right? It gives me a new clear start in terms of what I'm going to focus on. So just because there's such an overwhelming wealth of everything when it comes to the knowledge of jiu-jitsu and techniques and application of all those things, if I have a chance to kind of completely take myself out of a certain aspect of that, which will be in the gi upper body attacks, I can use no gi as a way to refresh my mind, just kind of like focus on just lower body and then kind of compartmentalize my learning that way. That's what I would probably recommend to someone who's starting. Maybe if they're doing a split like that to where they're exposing themselves to new techniques that are involving the legs, and then they can keep it like a clear cut separation in the beginning, at least between the two, especially if you're competing in the gi. All of those things you're not allowed to use, which that's whether that's good or not, or what we think about that, we should probably save that for another episode.
Because I think I disagree, but at the same time, not
Which, with what?
I think gi and no gi jiu-jitsu are just so different. I mean, they're similar techniques, but I just think they're so different. And it depends on what you want to do. Like if you're really trying to learn jiu-jitsu and everything that it has to offer, I agree. I think training in the gi, training no gi is great. But if you want to be good at gi jiu-jitsu, you need to be in the gi.
Okay.
So if you're trying to be good at no gi jiu-jitsu, don't waste time putting on the pajamas.
You think it's wasting time? Huh?
I honestly, look.
This will be something we'll disagree on.
Okay, that's okay. We're going to talk more about this over time.
It's good.
But at the same time, of course, I got biases, right? I train 10th Planet. We're all no gi. That's all we do. But, and I even heard John Donaher talking about this the other day with Faraz Sahabi. And he was like, they talked about this. They were like, you always get kind of the gi guys. Man, y'all guilt trip us all the time. They'll be like, no, for real. Y'all be, you guys should be training the gi. I'm like, that's never like, okay, I'm gonna give you.
That's because you ask us to train in no gi, and we will, because we'll just take the jacket off and boom, here we go, here we are, let's do it.
I love
it. For you guys, it's like you're putting on a 50-pound jacket and a rucksack.
This thing. What is this shit? And so it's like, but look, in PT, they did the same shit to me when I first graduated. They're like, your first job should be in a hospital. I'm like, really?
Ooh, that's a whole Pandora box there.
It's like, but I was man, I wanted to work in an outpatient clinic, man. I wanted to do sports med. That was kind of what I wanted to do. I was like, the hospital. I get the idea behind it, and there's some good reasons to advocate for that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you want to be good hospital-based PT, you become a hospital-based PT. If you want to be a good outpatient PT, you need to go to outpatient. So same thing with gi, same thing with no gi. That's just how. And again, I think people like John Donaher and Faraz Sahabi had the same conversation and they basically came to the same conclusion. I like the gi. I'm fascinated with it. There's so many more cool things you can do with it. But right now, I'm trying to be good at no gi.
I totally get that, and I'll have to say a different. I mean, I will disagree, but I get what you're saying. I think specificity of training is crucial to reach the highest performance level, right? So I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm thinking though on another level that when you're taking the PT school example, you're learning everything together at first and then you're specializing, right? So that's what I think you should do also in jiu-jitsu. But also from a different perspective, I like to have I like to get out of my own head sometimes to think differently.
Yeah.
I'm challenged to think differently if I'm doing no-gi because I have no grips. I have no attachment, so to say, right? I have to find new ways to get to certain outcomes. And I like to do no-gi, number one, because I want to learn it as well, right? I want to be good at it as well. But I'm also using it to help my gi because every time or not every time, but often when I train no-gi, I find different things I didn't realize were present that I could take advantage of in no-gi. For example, the Darce choke. It's definitely easier to do a Darce choke in no-gi. But learning it there and being now situationally aware of I can utilize this also in gi, I've been able to take that and add to the gi game. So I think that's true for both worlds. I think you can also train gi and become better at defenses. And when you're let's say, for example, if you're in gi and you are training how to get out of an armbar or how to get out of a triangle. And then you find the basics, right? Okay, well, it's harder now because not only do they have it locked in, but they have the gi to hold on to. There's friction. It's hard to get out. And then you take those basic, tools that you use to escape from that position in the gi. You take it to no gi, and now you don't have even the friction of the gi, and you don't have the holding on of the gi. And now it's easier, but you've had the ability to focus on how important those details are to use to escape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now it's so much easier in the no-gi.
Yeah.
But you've had the ability to kind of like change the way you were thinking and pay attention to different details. And that's what I like.
Yeah. I hear you on that for sure. I've got buddies who I respect, and they say the exact same thing, about training the gi. And they just, the problem I always have is it always seems to be like a little bit of a guilt trip. You should train the gi, man. Come on, man. I'm like, I get that there are some actual technical reasons why training in the gi is good. So
it's for the streets, man. People wear jackets.
Right, yeah, because we're all wearing kimonos and streets. I get it. But anyway, it's a good conversation. We'll probably have it again. I think this is probably a good time to start wrapping things up.
Yeah.
The B team video was very, very interesting for all of us to watch this past week.
Yeah. So basically, what's the message? I think maybe from my perspective, the message I was trying to get across is, if you're working a specific joint lock for too long, you're placing yourself at risk, even though it's in practice and you're not placing yourself into the finish scenario, you're still applying stresses to your joints. So think about taking time to let your joints recover from that specific submission. Maybe try it on the other side of your body. Be versatile in that, and give your joint time to recover from the stresses. But also, on the other hand, we were talking about awareness. And that moving target of not being aware or knowing what's going on, and then being aware, knowing what's going on, and being too comfortable and stressful, angles or positions.
Yeah, and I think both of those things rely on things like coaching and good training partners and all those things that help make a jiu-jitsu journey easier to navigate and stay on the mats. And so that's what this whole thing is about.
Yep.
That's why you and I got together and started doing Physioplata
podcast, guys.
All right, so hey, listen, I want you to please, if you like what you're hearing, please hit that like and subscribe button. It's going to please the algorithm. It's going to help us deliver some more content out to you. If you've got any questions or suggestions about what kinds of topics you'd like to hear a little bit more about related to injury, rehabilitation, conditioning, that's what we're here for. That's what Patrick started this for.
We'd love to hear back from you guys. Share questions, comments. We love it. And if you like it, don't forget to share also. That really helps. That's what we're trying to do, is just spread the word, help everybody we can, potentially reach. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode. Later, guys.